Hello guys, today is going to be my fifth foray in my How to Play series, and today I wanted to cover the Zorro RPG by Gallant Knight Games. And again, those are not meant to be deep dive, they're not meant to sell you on the game or tell you what the game is about or to make you an expert. I will not try to make you ready to run the game, and those videos are just for if you are invited to join a game on a short notice, you could watch the video and be able to follow along. Also, will not cover character creation, as you can just follow the book for that, or just use a pre-gen character. And this is not a review. I'm not gonna comment about the design of the game. I will, however, for this game, I believe, like create a companion video about a review of the game a little further on the line. So keep your eye peeled for that. So the basic. Zorro RPG used the Western game D6 system that we're familiar in Star Wars. So for those that are not familiar, it's a dice pool system where you get a number of dice from your attribute and your skill, and you can add some modifier to it. Although this game is very light on the modifier, and it's only D6 that are used in the game. So it's a D6 only game, and you're not looking for success, but you add the dice together and you try to beat a difficulty level or opposed roll. Difficulty level, you can pause and read them if you want. They go from 5 to 35. There's nothing too exceptional there. On every dice pool that you're gonna get, one dice need to be distinguishable, either by color or size, doesn't matter, because this is gonna be the wild die. And if you roll a 6 on your wild dice, you're gonna get an advantage. An advantage if the roll was successful, so if the total of the die, including the wild dice, is already higher than the difficulty level, then you can get either an exceptional success, so you succeed what you're trying to achieve and then some, or you can gain 2 hero points. It's the player that decides. If the roll wasn't successful, then the wild die can explode, so you can re-roll the 6 that you roll on the wild die, and every time you roll a 6 again, you can roll again another die until you're not rolling a 6. So that gives you an extra chance to have the test succeed. On a 1 on the wild dice, you can get a complication. So again, if the roll was successful, so if you manage to have a big enough total despite the 1, then the GM can pick 1. So either like you're gonna succeed but not completely, something is gonna go a bit wrong and you're gonna get 1 hero point, or the GM can decide that you actually don't succeed, but then he has to reward 2 hero point. I'm gonna talk about the hero point soon. If the roll failed, then not only you fail, but you have a complication that is introduced, so there's something a little more, and you gain a hero point. Attribute and skill. There's a 5 attribute: agility, brawn, knowledge, perception, and charm. The skills, it's a fairly short list of skill, but the games say that those are not the only skill that can exist, and the character sheet leaves you some blank space to add your own if you want, depending on the type of game you're running. So you can pause and read them if you want. There's a mechanic of doubling down, so if you fail on a roll, you can decide to re-roll, but if you fail again, then there's a complication that happens, and you don't gain any hero point. So hero points, they can be used, like I mentioned, or you can gain some. They can be used to double the number of dice for a roll, or the dice code. I put a question mark there because the book is not clear on that. Because technically, a dice code would be if you had like 3 dice plus 2. The dice code would be all that, and I'm not sure if the plus 2 is doubled or not. That wasn't clear exactly. So would you do like if you had like 3 dice plus 2? Would you do like 6 dice plus 4? I guess so. But anyway, like I said, this game you rarely use the pluses, so don't worry too much about it. Or you can reroll a failed roll without doubling down, so you just like retake the roll. Or you can avoid being stunned in combat, which will make more sense a little later on. There you go, combat. There's no initiative in combat. You go around the table in the order that people are seated at. Every round lasts about 5 seconds. And at the start of a round, everyone declare the action they're gonna take. You can take multiple action in a round, and if you take multiple action in a round, those actions are resolved in action segment. So everyone resolve one action, then the next action, and so if you did less action than the others, you gonna be done sooner, but other people can still go. Uh, Movement is considered like an action. So if you want to move, that's your action for this segment, and then you can attack or you can do the opposite. But in the resolution, they're gonna go in that order, like one action at a time. You can use multiple skill in a roll, so multiple thing that like movement is not a skill, doesn't require a dice roll, but you can do multiple dice roll in a round. But every time, if you decide to do more than one, well, every use of skill that you do above the first one impose a penalty of one die on every roll. So if you decide to do three action, like use three skill in your round, well, because the first one is free, so every skill used is gonna be minus two die. So there's some skill that you won't be able to use at that point because you would have like no dice left, but that's something that you have to balance. And if you try to do too much, well, nothing is gonna succeed. So I like this mechanic. It's kind of like a self-balancing. Movement, like I said, movement count as an action. You move 5 meter per round. The game is in meter. If you run, that's gonna be 10 meter per round. But if you run, all the skill use you're gonna do lose one die. So there's no dice roll to run, but it's still the same effect as if you use the skill. You can crawl, and that you're gonna move 2 meter per round. That also remove one die for all the skill use. So again, the same as if you did use an extra skill. Getting prone is free when you move. So as you finish your movement, you can decide to get prone. And getting up count as an action. So in the action segment, there's gonna be like one of your segment is gonna be getting up. When you're prone, you get -5 to parry and +5 to dodge, which I'm gonna talk about there. Melee attack are opposed by the parry skill, by your parry stat. It's not a skill, but it's parry stat that is static, so you don't roll for it. So and your parry is your agility attribute times 5, and range attack in the same manner. You don't roll against them, but you have a dodge stat that is based on your perception times 5. So it just gives like a static target number for the people attacking you. When you're hit by an attack, the damage roll is based on the weapon they use, and melee weapon or based on Brawn. And the damage is opposed by a Brawn roll. And if you have armor, it gives bonus to your Brawn roll. So you're gonna roll your Brawn attribute against the damage roll of the opponent. This is a little more complex. If your Brawn roll is greater than damage roll, you get stunned. So you still got it. There's no real damage there. Like there's like I guess wound, but you're stunned. When you're stunned, you become prone. You cannot act for the rest of the round, but that end at the end of the round, although you're still prone. If your Brawn roll is smaller or equal to the damage roll of the opponent, then you're wounded. So again, you become prone. So you fall on your ass quite a bit in that game. You cannot act for the rest of the round. So if you had other action planned in the subsequent action segment, you can't. Same thing for stun. And once you're wounded, you lose one dice on every roll that you make. And if you're wounded again, you become incapacitated. So in that case, you just cannot act. If your Brawn roll was smaller than the damage roll, and you roll a complication on your Brawn roll, so you roll a 1 on the wild dice on your Brawn roll, then you're mortally wounded. So again, you're incapacitated. You cannot act. You cannot do nothing for the rest of the until you get healed. And you have to roll 2 dice at the end of each round. And if the result of those 2 dice is smaller than the number of rounds that you've been mortally wounded, then you're just dead. So you won't die for the first 2 rounds because you cannot roll less than 2 on 2 dice. But starting round 3, there's chance that you can just like straight up die. You have additional option on combat. You can take a round for preparation, so you do nothing for all round. You just say you're gonna prepare for an action, and then when on the next round when you actually do the action, you can have an extra die for it. You can do a feint. If you score a 6 on the wild dice, you can remove your melee skill from the target parry or dodge you choose for the next attack targeting the character. So if there's an ally nearby, you can do that, and then it's easier for the ally to hit them. And you can also do a feint without rolling a 6 on the wild die if you have a melee skill of 4 or plus, 4 or more. And if you do that, you don't need a roll, but it counts as an action. So you don't roll, but it counts as if you use the skill for the penalty on using multiple skill. You can do a riposte, and that is if the attacker roll a 1 on his wild die. The defender can spend 1 hero point and immediately make an attack. And if he chose this option, then there's no other complication for the attacker. And it does also count as an action so it counts as a skill use for so you're gonna like you're gonna lose 1 dice on all the other action that you plan. And again, you can do a riposte if your melee skill is 4 or more. It's an attack, and if an attack misses you, then you can just riposte, even though the attacker didn't roll a 1 on his wild die. And to do that, you do have to spend 1 hero point. You can try to disarm. Again, the attacker has to roll a 1 on his wild die. And it does count as an action for the penalty based on the skill use. And you can also disarm as an attack. You don't have to have a specific melee skill for that. You can just try to disarm somebody instead of rolling for damage. And the difficulty level is the target Brawn times 5. You can do a full defense, so you can decide not to attack during the round. You add your melee skill to your parry, or your acrobatic to your dodge, and if you do a full defense, that's the only thing you do during the round. It's a Zorro, so you have like secret identity. When they refer to secret identity, it's your non-heroic alter ego. So, like in Zorro, it's Don Diego. Is the Don Diego would be like the secret identity of Zorro. It's kind of like it can seem backward because you say like, well, Don Diego is who isn't publicly, and Zorro is as a hidden character. But it's like the hero is your true self, and the lame civilian that you pretend to be is your secret identity. Your secret identity has its own hero point, so you have to count them separate than your true self hero point, and you can have up to 3 for that. And you gain hero point by acting in your secret identity. So if you pretend to be like a coward or stuff like that, like, and then somebody like that, let's say like that Zorro or the Zorro-like character would intervene, and you don't, and you kind of stop yourself, and you cower in fear, then you're gonna be rewarded with 1 hero point. There's a mechanic of suspicion, and that is how close you are to be discovered. That people will link that, oh, actually, Don Diego is Zorro. Raising suspicion is when you act out of character. So if your secret identity is supposed to be cowardly or lazy or whatever, and then sometimes something you do that it go against that, then you gain 1 suspicion point. Or if you act against, because like Zorro is a lot about like, oh, there's this tyrannical regime in the region, and you fight like the people, the peasant are being oppressed, and you fight for the peasant. If you act against the tyrannical regime, then you're gonna get 1 suspicion point. And 1 action only raise 1 suspicion point. Like the example they use, if you feed the poor, that will give you 1 suspicion point. But once you gain the suspicion point for feeding the poor, you can feed the poor all you want, and it won't make you more suspicious unless you do something a little more. If you go further with that, you can get exposed. So if you're every time you gain a new suspicion point, you roll a d6, and if the result is lower than your current suspicion score, well, you expose. When you expose, like, people know who you are. People know that, oh, Don Diego is Zorro. So you have no more access to your secret identity. And you can decide to go public. So you admit it and you say, yeah, I am Zorro. And then you gain support. You can gain support from the local population because, like, you're supposed to play a hero. Or you can try to clean your name. And if you do that, it resets your suspicion to 0. To clean your name, what you're gonna do, you're gonna try to prove that you cannot be the hero, that the secret identity cannot be the same people as the hero. So that's when you try to make scheme like, you're gonna try to have a situation where Don Diego and Zorro are seen by somebody important in the same place at the same time. So there's different scheme but that's the kind of thing you're gonna do. You're gonna try to do to prove that no, it cannot be you. You cannot be Zorro. You can also try to allaying suspicion. That's when if you complete an adventure without raising suspicion. So if you do a mission or whatever and you don't gain any new suspicion point, you can roll a d6, and if you roll a 6, then you can lower your suspicion by 1. You're gonna have a hideout. This is very free form. So you pick a location. It can be like a urban, country, or wild. You describe it. Is it gonna be in a cave? Is it an old mission? Is it an old hospital? Is it or maybe an hospital that is currently in use? And you pick 4 feature. So there's a list of feature you can pick there. You can like pause and read them if you want. Each player, each character is gonna have its own hideout, but you can decide to have a collective hideout, and then you can pick 4 feature per character. So you're gonna have one hideout that's gonna be much more decked out, but then you only have one. So if this hideout get compromised, then you have to build a new one, or you're shit out of luck. So that's about what I wanted to cover with this game. I don't know if this is going to be useful or to anyone. I hope it was at least interesting. I thank you for watching. If you have questions, feel free to ask down below. Or if you're familiar with the game and you think I missed something important, or if I got something wrong, write it down and I'll pin your comments so others can see you. Have a good day and take care.